You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph, and today I'm joined by Chase Sr. He covers both the 49ers and the Eagles for Chat Sports, and he has a wonderful channel, 49ers TV, right? Covering the Niners?
Yeah, so it's 49ers TV is the ad on YouTube, but 49ers Report is the actual channel. We have 77,000 subscribers. So I appreciate you having me on, and definitely I'm in a unique circumstance covering both San Francisco, the Eagles, as well as the entire NFL. But I believe there's nobody better equipped to break down this matchup than me, because I've pretty much watched every single snap for both teams this year. So, Steph, I appreciate you having me on. And your Nick Bosa impersonations have given me and many others a lot of laughs this year.
Appreciate that. And yeah, definitely, you're definitely the perfect guy to have on to objectively look at both of these teams, right? Since you cover both. So, and I can safely say, I think these are the four best teams left playing on Sunday in the AFC and NFC Championships. Both the Eagles and 49ers have top 5 offense and defense. A lot of people seem to think that this is going to be a shootout. I'm not one of those people. You know, I think this is going to be a defensive battle, low-scoring game. Are you kind of getting the same sense, or how do you sort of see this one playing out, and, you know, which team would it favor?
I agree with you that these are the best 4 teams left, and this is what you want as an overall football fan at this stage in the NFL playoffs. Oftentimes, you might get an upset in the wild card round, the divisional round, and in that moment, it's really exciting. But then once that team advances, oftentimes they don't really have a chance in an NFC or AFC title game. And it kind of takes away from the excitement of what that stage of the playoffs and what that stage of the season should be, which is you want the best rosters, the best teams who are that equipped to compete for a Super Bowl to be playing against one another. So I think on the AFC side, you have the top 2 quarterbacks left in Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes. But on the NFC side, I believe that you have the 2 best and deepest rosters in the NFL in San Francisco and Philadelphia. And that's why I love this matchup so much. And I'm kind of nerding out about it, because both of these rosters, when you canvass them, Steph, have multiple future Hall of Famers, all pros, Pro Bowlers. On both coaching staffs, you have Kyle Shanahan, who's a finalist for Coach of the Year. Nick Sirianni should have been. And then multiple assistants on both sides are in the running for either head coaching jobs. Looks as though D'Amico could get the Texans head coaching job, as we talk here on Friday, potentially, as a former player there. Then on the Philadelphia side, Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, their 2 coordinators, are interviewing for jobs. And then they have some assistants who are interviewing for coordinator jobs out there. So it's just going to be a terrific matchup. As far as how I see it playing out, I believe it's going to be close. I think it comes down to the wire. My final prediction was 31-28 San Francisco, and we'll dive into why. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if it's something like you said, not as much of a defensive battle as last week, because I do believe that both of these offenses early might feel each other out, but then they're going to get aggressive and take some shots, because both of them are really explosive. And if they do go blow for blow here throughout the course of the ball game, then it could even out the scoreboard a little bit, and it could be a back and forth type of flow where a lot of points are scored.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. I do definitely feel like Kyle Shanahan took a conservative approach against the Cowboys. And part of that is because, you know, the Cowboys defense, they are pretty good this week, facing a much tougher test in the Eagles defense. So the margin of error is still very low, maybe even lower in this game, right? You have to be near perfect. But can the 49ers even afford to be conservative in this game and play it safe, given how explosive this Eagles offense can be?
I don't think so, especially if they fall down early. And the first 10, 15 minutes of this game are going to be really critical for both sides, for San Francisco and Brock Purdy to calm the nerves a little bit in a raucous environment and a hostile crowd that's going to be loud and juiced up. And then for Philadelphia, if they set the tone and they take a multi-score lead like they did against the Giants, we saw that game was pretty much over halfway through that first quarter in the divisional round, because Philadelphia just completely thrashed them in all phases of that game. I do agree with you, too, that Shanahan can't afford to be as kind of complacent and conservative as he was last week. And I understand where he's coming from, right? You're going up against a Cowboys team that does have one of the best defenses in the NFL. They have a really good front. They've been opportunistic in some of their turnovers and turning some of those giveaways into points. And you didn't want Brock Purdy to make some mistakes early to cost you the game. And the Cowboys do run kind of a multiple defense where if they were to confuse Purdy a little bit, then yeah, if he turns the football over, one of those turnovers could change the complexion of the game. In this game, though, from a schematic standpoint, I thought that Kyle went far too often with condensed and bunch formations. And with what the Eagles do defensively, they try to get home with 4. They like to play soft quarters coverage. I think what Shanahan has to do is spread it out a little bit more. Therefore, you cater to what the Eagles do defensively, which I think gives the Niners the edge offensively, which is getting the ball in space to your best playmakers, allowing Debo, Ayuk, and Kittle to pick up yards after the catch, Christian McCaffrey too. And this is an Eagles defense that isn't the best tackling team. So given their scheme that they play back, if they can't get home with 4, then they can be taken advantage of by Kyle Shanahan if he spreads it out. If they're able to get a pass rush with 4, though, that's when I worry about Purdy a little bit.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that, the fact that you want to get these playmakers out in space. And I think there will be an opportunity to do that in this game. Of course, Brock Purdy's not going to have a lot of time to throw the football, I would imagine, but I think it's going to be really important to try to manipulate the space a little bit. I've seen that, the Eagles corners, they play zone about 60% of the time. The linebackers, however, play man most of the time. So there's an opportunity right there to just move some of the linebackers out of the way, maybe with a Kittle, a Christian McCaffrey, move them out and get someone like a Debo Samuel, a Brandon Ayuk out in space where they make a lot of their damage. Everyone talks about this being Brock Purdy's toughest test, right? But I think, and that's true, but I think it's also fair to say that this is the best defense that both quarterbacks are facing this season. So now the Eagles have the benefit of a very good offensive line, one of the best in the league. This 49ers defense, obviously very good, hasn't translated to a ton of sacks as of late, but they've been making a difference outside of the stat sheet, right? Is there any weakness on this Eagles offensive line that the 49ers can take advantage of?
Not really. And it's a stellar matchup between the Eagles front and the Niners front, but as well as the entire defense. Every member of the Eagles offensive line, all 5 guys, were either an all-pro, a Pro Bowler, or a Pro Bowl alternate. So they're really, really good. But I do believe that the Niners have the level of physicality to match what the Eagles have. But honestly, in the trenches, both with the Eagles offensive line against the Niners defensive line, and then the Niners offensive line, which did not play well against Dallas, in my opinion, against the Eagles defensive line, that's probably the biggest key to the game, is controlling the line of scrimmage here. Because if either quarterback gets pressured, they could throw up a ball that's 50-50, go back the other way. And I believe that this game is going to be so close that one of those turnovers could really decide it. Going back to what you said about sacks, this is kind of my theory on sacks. And everybody, I've seen these side-by-side comparisons of the Eagles' 70 sacks to the 49ers just not having anywhere close, right? I look at sacks as wins and losses for a pitcher. It doesn't tell the full story. What tells the full story is an ERA for a pitcher. ERA, guy could have a sub-3 and he could go 7-12, but just because he goes 7-12 doesn't mean that he had a good year. You might not get home with a sack, but a quarterback pressure, a quarterback hit accumulated throughout the duration of the ball game, which could lead to an errant throw, a mistake, an interception going the other way, a critical miss on a 3rd down. We saw last week Dak Prescott had CD Lamb wide open, Bosa able to push the offensive lineman into him. He sensed the pressure, he couldn't make the throw. On the interception against the Raiders, when Jarrett Stidham threw it up to Deshaun Gibson, the only reason he couldn't step up and make that throw is because Bosa pushed the offensive lineman into him and he couldn't finish it and he hit his arm. So sacks are sometimes overrated. I also want to say this about the Niners linebacking core. they have the speed vertically and sideline to sideline to really compete and combat what the Eagles like to do with their offensive system. Jalen Hurts is not a Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, where he's going to decipher the defense, go through 4 progressions. If the first or 2 aren't there, yeah, he has the capabilities to check it down, but he's going to rely on his legs there. And with the
Right.
multiple Niners defense, with D'Amico showing blitz, stacking the box with 7, and then dropping sometimes 3-4 guys back, that's how I believe Jalen Hurts could get confused a little bit. So again, like, you go across the board, you can look position by position, and really outside of like quarterback and offensive line where the Eagles are better, these two teams are very, very close. Maybe you go Eagles corners with Slay and Bradbury over San Francisco with Mooney, Ward, and Diamador Lenore.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned Jalen Hurts using his legs, right? Because one thing I mentioned earlier today on Sports Grid was that the 49ers defense, they need to be disciplined. And that includes pocket and gap discipline, because it isn't just about getting after the quarterback. You have to kind of keep the pocket tight in addition to just like attacking the quarterback. If you leave any open rushing lanes for Jalen Hurts, he's going to make you pay with his legs, right? So I looked back at the 49ers game versus the Bears in week 1, and they got gashed by Fields, and not even on the ground really, because I think they only gave up like 20 or 30 rushing yards to Fields, not much. It was a lack of discipline that really hurt them, because you had Hufanga coming down and he left a guy wide open on the backside. And as soon as he sees Fields running off, he wants to attack. Then also not being aware of where Fields was in relation to the line of scrimmage, right? These are mistakes that they can't afford to make against a Jalen Hurts, right? Do you think D'Amico Ryans will have a better plan in place this week? Like, what do you think he would tell his defense and how to combat that?
Yeah, so, I mean, excellent points right there. And we know that San Francisco struggled with mobile quarterbacks this year. They lost to Justin Fields. They lost to Marcus Mariota, which is funny to look back on because he honestly had one of his best games as starting quarterback as a pro. They lost to Patrick Mahomes. And what did those quarterbacks do? They didn't necessarily crush the Niners with running the football, although they had a couple of big runs. It's the extension of plays out of structure where you might do everything right. You might get the pass rush. You nearly get the sack. Your coverage is good downfield, which is why the quarterback has to boot out of the pocket to try to extend things a little bit. Your coverage can hold up for 7 seconds, but it's the play that happens after that, which is what makes them so difficult to defend and what can be backbreaking for this defense. And I kind of think about this a lot in this matchup leading up to it. Steph, you and I know that Russell Wilson was the Niners' daddy for a really long time, 14-3 all time against San Francisco. And what did he do? He made those out of structure improvisational plays. And San Francisco really struggled against him over time. I understand it was a previous regime with Harbaugh, but even with Shanahan prior to this year, they really struggled against Russ. Jalen Hurts has some of those same qualities where he has a good pocket feel. Keep an eye out for this trend. Purdy likes to go left when he gets pressured. Hurts goes to the right toward his throwing arm. He's not great throwing across his body to the left. Look out for that. You have to contain it because those are the plays that can really take the air out of the defense. And on a huge critical 3rd down in which, again, you do everything right, it's that backbreaking play which can really gash you. So coaches like to call it pass rush lane integrity and disciplined pass rush lanes. That's what the Niners have to do. But because the Eagles are so diverse and they have so many weapons, you also can't afford to just have Fred Warner spy Hurts all game. First of all, he's too good at doing that. Second of all, you need to be able to defend the Eagles across the field in their spread out formation. So I expect them to have a spy a little bit, but they can't go toward it all the time. And that's why it's critical, to your point, that the Niners have that discipline when they rush him.
Yeah, I would almost say, like, I'm okay with the 49ers living with 5-7 yard rushing gains for Jalen Hurts once he gets past that line of scrimmage. Okay, now get to him, now swarm. But you have to make sure that you have that discipline on the back end as well. One thing I wanted to mention, Eagles assistant DB coach, DK McDonald, he was at Iowa State, right? When Brock Purdy was there. He's supposedly given his defense a whole list of things that they got to do this week in order to have a chance against Purdy. Should this be a legit concern for the 49ers? I mean, I think every team has gone into these games against the 49ers as of late thinking we're going to be the ones to stop and limit Purdy. And, he just continues to do what he needs to do. I thought he didn't do a whole lot against the Cowboys statistically, but he did what he needed to do. So is this a concern that you see for the 49ers this week?
Yeah, I see it a couple of different ways, obviously, and it's him, and they have another assistant actually on that defensive staff who was at Iowa State with Purdy. Obviously, they know what he does well, and they understand how he sees the game to a certain degree. But also at the same time, when they were at Iowa State, did they ever have to worry about Brock Purdy and a Kyle Shanahan-led offense? And Shanahan's been in his bag for a long time now. This is a Niners team that with Purdy is averaging more than 32 points per game since he took over. And during their 12-game winning streak, they've won more than 30 points. And a lot of people want to panic about them only scoring 19 against Dallas. Sometimes can you just give credit where credit is due and say that this Cowboys defense is really good and Shanahan played it a little bit too conservative so that Purdy didn't make, that game altering turnover. So I think it matters to a certain degree, but at the same time, now is the time for Shanahan with his legacy on the line to get in his bag, to make the adjustments from last week, spread it out a little more, scheme up the run game to take advantage of an Eagles rushing defense that ranks 16th among 32 teams in the NFL, and find ways to get the ball in space to your playmakers and force the Eagles to match the level of physicality that the Niners are going to bring. I didn't like how they kind of strayed away from Kittle last week. I want to see them go back to Kittle down the seam and down the numbers, even if that means that you have to use Deebo Samuel more as a decoy. He's not 100% right now, so don't force him the football. Look, it matters a little bit, obviously, but I think it's getting blown out of proportion just a little bit because Kyle Shanahan and this coaching staff has had Purdy ready to play, as evidenced by the numbers of him throwing 16 touchdowns to 3 interceptions over his last 8 games. 7 of those were starts.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was interesting. You said that they, George Kittle maybe had a quiet game. I mean, he had 95 yards in that one, but compared to what he'd been doing the previous few weeks, I hear you there. But it sounds like, you gave the prediction 31-28 for this game. So it sounds like you think this will be an aggressive game from both sides. I don't know if you said which team you think is going to win. So who gets the 31 in your score prediction?
Yeah, I'm going with the Niners. I think that they have the defensive talent, the defensive physicality, and the defensive speed to combat and keep up with Philadelphia. I do like the Niners' playoff high-level game experience as compared to Philly. Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts have only played and coached in 2 playoff games together. San Francisco has gone on the road to Dallas. They went on the road against the Packers. They've made it to 2 straight NFC Championship games, 4 over the last, 5 years. This is an organization that's made it to 6 NFC title games since 2011. And these are 2 of the best organizations in the sport. I say that about the Niners, but Philadelphia's made it to 7 NFC title games over the last 21 years. So I like how the Niners match up defensively against Philadelphia. I think that D'Amico can confuse Jalen Hurts a little bit by showing blitz, dropping guys back, getting a pass rush. I think the pass rush is going to be the key element to this game against Hurts or either Brock Purdy. And then with this Eagles defense, they are top 5, top 10 in almost every major defensive category. But if you look at their schedule, they haven't played against elite quarterbacks, and when they have, they've really struggled. They've also struggled against quality offenses, and they haven't played an offense that has the array and plethora of weapons that San Francisco has, an offense in the Niners that can be so multiple within their scheme. They haven't gone up against a coach like Kyle Shanahan. And while I think the Eagles are a great team, Lane Johnson, Jason Kelsey, future Hall of Famers, multiple Pro Bowlers, as I said, all across the field, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, they have Darius Slay, James Bradbury, C.J. Gardner-Johnson is a great player. They're a great team. I think the Niners are a potentially all-time great team. We're talking about Fred Warner, future Hall of Famer, George Kittle, future Hall of Famer, Nick Bosa, future Hall of Famer, Trent Williams, future Hall of Famer. Deebo was an All-Pro last year. I think that Ayuk is the most underrated wide receiver in the game. Talanoa Hufanga was an All-Pro, big player in this game, by the way. He can't get got in coverage like like he's been susceptible to getting had in this game, but he's even good. Niners cornerbacks are going to have to step up, but like Eric Armstead's a huge disruptor, and Kyle Shanahan's legacy is somewhat on the line. Can he prove that he can win the big game? He's been to the big game. He's played in a lot of big games. He's also squandered a lot of advantages in those aforementioned games as a coordinator with the Falcons, 28-3, and with San Francisco in the Super Bowl, and last year with a 10-point lead against the Rams in the NFC Championship game. All he needs to be considered one of the great architects of offensive football of all time, he's missing the one thing on his mantle. It's a Super Bowl championship. It's the Super Bowl ring. So I believe that San Francisco can go into a hostile environment as long as Purdy doesn't melt down in what is going to be an incredible environment right up there with the 12s in Seattle, maybe even crazy. I like the Niners to win this game, Steph.
All right. You guys heard it here first. Well, Chase, I know you got to get out of here. I just got one last quick question Melissa has here. How healthy is Lane Johnson coming off that groin injury?
This dude's a warrior. The matchup of him going up against Nick Bosa is all time. Lane Johnson's the best right tackle in the game, just like Trent Williams is the best left tackle in the game. He has not given up a sack in 2 years. It's crazy. So he has this abductor injury. It's a core muscle injury. After Michael Parsons had rushed him early, you could see that he was kind of holding it and favoring it a little bit. He's going to hold off on surgery, but he's played through shattered ankles before. This guy is awesome. He's going to be fine. And one more note before I get out of here that I don't want to let slip my mind. Because I think that these two rosters are so evenly matched, and because I think this game is going to come down to the wire, how about this? Robbie Gould, 29-29 in his postseason career. On the other end, Jake Elliott is 12-12 in his postseason career. Could this game down to which kicker's streak ends? That's something to keep an eye out for, and obviously dramatics would ensue if that does happen.
Awesome. Well, Chase, thank you so much for coming on the pod today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Love having your unique perspective for this one, and hope you enjoy the game on Sunday.
I will. What's your prediction before I get out?
Man, don't put me on the spot like that. Well, I didn't have an exact score. I would say I think like 2017. I think it's just going to be pretty low scoring, and I think it's going to be one between 3 points or maybe even less.
Cool. I appreciate you having me on, and let's have a day on Sunday.
Yeah, let's go. All right, man. Have a good one. Thank you guys so much for listening in. And make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Make sure you like this video. Have a good rest of your Friday. Peace.